You've heard the number, 77%. That's the official debt to GDP ratio they want you to look at. It sounds fine. It sounds manageable. But what if I told you that number is a lie? A beautiful, carefully constructed illusion? Because when you look beneath the surface, when you dig into the spreadsheets that the government doesn't want the world to see, you find the real number. The fatal number, it's not 77%, it's 360%. That isn't just a high number. That's a ticking time bomb built into the heart of the world's second largest economy. And when it explodes, the shockwave is going to hit everyone, everywhere. What is this hidden 360% debt? Who exactly owes the money? And why are the people in Beijing suddenly so quiet about it? That's what we're breaking down today. For the last 40 years, the story of the world has been the story of China's rise. It was a spectacular, unbelievable ascent. Think about it. A country that was closed off, struggling, suddenly opened up and started growing at 10%, 12%, even 14% a year. It was the economic miracle. It was the engine of global growth. The people running the show in Beijing, the Chinese Communist Party, made an unstated promise to their people. You might not have freedom, but you will have endless prosperity. And for a long time, they delivered. Hundreds of millions of people were pulled out of poverty faster than any other nation in history. They bought apartments, they sent their kids to good schools, they saw their country become a global power. But this kind of breakneck, non-stop growth isn't free. There's always a cost. And the cost of China's miracle was paid for on credit. It was paid for with debt. Not just a little debt, but an absolutely staggering, unprecedented mountain of debt that has quietly piled up, far away from the official financial statements. Today, China is facing something it hasn't faced in a generation, a massive slowdown. And a slowdown is the worst possible scenario when you're sitting on a mountain of debt this size. It's like stopping a train that's going 200 miles an hour. The inertia, the stress, the pressure on the structure, it's going to break something. And what's breaking is the financial system itself. We're going to walk through this $60 trillion crisis. We start with the problem that everyone knows about real estate, and then we'll dive into the shadow systems, the secret local government accounts, and the state-owned enterprise monopolies that are holding the entire economy hostage. This is the crisis that could truly change the geopolitical landscape forever. Let's start with the most obvious visible crack in the foundation, the property market. If you follow the news at all, you've heard the names. Evergrande, Country Garden. These were once titans representing China's unstoppable growth. Now, they are symbols of its fatal flaw. In China, owning property wasn't just about having a place to live. It was the only way to save money and get ahead. People couldn't invest in foreign markets easily, and the local stock market was seen as too volatile. So, 70% of household wealth in China is tied up in real estate. That's a huge number. Compare that to the US, where it's less than 35%. The Chinese people poured their life savings, their parents' savings, their grandparents' savings into apartments. They believed the promise. Prices would only ever go up. And for decades, they did. This led to something insane. Developers built millions of apartments that nobody needed. This is where the infamous ghost cities come from. Picture this. Whole districts sparkling new with skyscrapers, parks, and beautiful roads, but completely empty. Entire cities built for 500,000 people that have fewer than 20,000 residents. Take Ordos, for example. It was built as a lavish city designed for over 1 million residents. It has a stunning opera house, huge museums, and wide avenues. But today, huge sections of it are vacant, a monumental monument to wasted capital and blind optimism. These weren't built by crazy people. They were built by companies fueled by cheap credit and the guaranteed belief that someone eventually would move in. The debt associated with this sector is astronomical. Developers borrowed trillions to build. Homebuyers borrowed trillions to buy. And when the music finally stopped in 2021, and companies like Evergrande couldn't pay their bills, the entire system started to seize up. Evergrande alone defaulted on hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's not just the company that suffers. When a developer fails, who loses their money? The millions of ordinary people who paid for an apartment that was never finished in a building that now stands half-constructed, completely worthless. This is a massive social crisis that Beijing is struggling to contain. The property sector, which once made up a quarter of China's entire economy, is now a dead weight dragging the whole ship down. But the property debt, as bad as it is only the tip of the iceberg. The reason the true debt ratio is 360% and not the official 77% is because of the two entities that act as the party's secret credit card: local government and state-owned enterprises, SOEs. Let's talk about local government debt first. In China, local cities and provinces like Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Sichuan are responsible for funding most of their own infrastructure and social services. But the central government strictly limits how much they can officially borrow. This is where the invention of the LGFV comes in. It stands for Local Government Financing Vehicle. Think of an LGFV as a shadow company. A city government can't borrow money to build a highway, but they can set up a completely separate company, the LGFV, and that company can borrow money in the open market. The local government then funnels money to the LGFV, often in the form of promising it future land revenue. The LGFV takes this money and promises and borrows billions from state-run banks or private investors using the local government's implied guarantee as collateral. This system was an ingenious way to bypass the central government's debt limits, allowing local officials to constantly stimulate their economies and show massive GDP growth, which got them promotions. For decades, this worked perfectly. Every single road, bridge, high-speed rail line, and airport you see in modern China was built using LGFV debt. But now, the bills are due. The combined LGFV debt is estimated to be over $9 trillion. This figure is not included in the official government debt numbers. This debt is suffocating cities across the country. Many smaller cities and provinces are now spending most of their annual revenue just to pay the interest on these LGFV loans, leaving nothing left for schools, hospitals, or social welfare. They are fiscally paralyzed. The system is doomed to fail because the assets they built, like the ghost cities or unused highways, aren't generating enough income to pay back the original loan. It's the ultimate Ponzi scheme built on concrete and steel. Then you have the state-owned enterprises, SOEs. These are massive corporations, often monopolies in sectors like steel, energy, and banking, that are completely owned and controlled by the state. Their purpose is not just to make money, but to follow the party's industrial policies and ensure employment stability. When the economy slows down, the government tells the SOEs to keep hiring, keep building, and keep expanding, even if it makes no economic sense. So these SOEs are forced to borrow colossal amounts of money from state-owned banks to fund unneeded expansion. Their balance sheets are bloated with debt, and they are notoriously inefficient because they are protected from competition. This owed debt is now estimated at over $15 trillion. This isn't public debt in the traditional sense, but if any of these massive firms fail, and many are struggling, the government, the ultimate owner, will be forced to bail them out. That means the taxpayer ultimately pays the price. This moral hazard is the second pillar holding up the 360% crisis. So, when you add up the official government debt, the provincial LGFV debt, and the massive SOE debt, you realize that China's actual credit exposure is unlike anything the world has ever seen. It's not just a crisis of debt. It's a crisis of trust and a crisis of structural integrity. The structure is built on sand. Now we get to the current problem. All of this hidden debt works fine only if the economy keeps growing at 8% or 9% every single year. That growth is what generates the revenue to pay the interest, to create the jobs, and to maintain the illusion of endless prosperity. But the growth has stopped. It hasn't collapsed yet, but it has slowed to a painful crawl. Official growth is around 5%, but many analysts and even some Chinese officials quietly admit that the real number is much lower, maybe 3% or even less. Why the slowdown? Three key reasons: the end of low-cost manufacturing. China's initial miracle was built on being the cheapest place to make everything. That advantage is now gone. Wages have risen dramatically, and other countries, Vietnam, Mexico, India, are now cheaper. Global supply chains are moving away, a trend accelerated by the trade war with the U.S. This shift has crippled the foundational industry that provided so much employment. Demographic collapse. China is getting old fast. The infamous one-child policy, which was in place for decades, created a demographic time bomb. China now has a shrinking workforce and a rapidly growing population of retirees. This is the opposite of what an economy needs to pay back a debt mountain. They are running out of young workers to support the massive infrastructure and social systems they built. This is a doom loop. Fewer young people mean fewer home buyers, which kills the property market, which kills local government revenue. It's a fatal, self-inflicted wound. The crisis of confidence and deflation. This is the most urgent issue right now. When people see property developers failing and the news is bad, they stop spending. Why buy a new car or a refrigerator if your apartment is losing value and your job is insecure? This lack of spending is causing deflation, the sustained fall in prices. Deflation is a poison for an indebted economy. If the price of goods and services falls, but the amount you owe on your loan stays the same, your debt effectively becomes much, much bigger. It makes paying back that $15 trillion in SOE debt or the LGFV loans harder every single day. Deflation is a symptom of a deeper problem, a crisis of confidence. The Chinese people are saving money at unprecedented rates because they are scared. They are scared of unemployment. They are scared of their unfinished apartments, and they are scared of what happens when the government can't afford to bail out the system anymore. And a scared consumer is the final piece of the collapse puzzle. When we talk about an economic crisis this large, the most common historical parallel people make is with Japan in the 1990s. And the comparison is absolutely terrifying. In the late 1980s, Japan had its own economic miracle. Its property and stock market were in a massive, unstoppable bubble. People thought Tokyo real estate alone was worth more than all the land in America. When that bubble burst in 1991, Japan fell into what is now known as the lost decades. Japan's debt soared, and its economy stagnated for 30 years. Growth virtually stopped. People lost their life savings. China today has many of the same fatal symptoms Japan had. An aging population, a massive property bubble that has burst, and an over-reliance on debt-fueled infrastructure spending. But China's crisis is arguably worse. Why? Japan was rich before its crisis. It had a highly developed, high-income economy. China is trying to deal with this massive debt crisis while still being a middle-income country. They are stuck in what economists call the middle-income trap. They became too expensive to be the world's factory, but they haven't developed the high-tech, high-value industries needed to become a truly rich nation. Japan had rich citizens and robust social safety nets to weather the storm. China does not. Most Chinese people do not have the same level of wealth, and their social safety net is much weaker. This means a financial crisis in China will instantly translate into a social crisis, leading to widespread unemployment and instability. The fear isn't a sudden 2008-style market crash. The fear is a slow, grinding decline, a stagnation that lasts 20 or 30 years, trapping hundreds of millions of people in a country that promised them superpower status, but delivers only economic gloom. This is the fatal scenario, a future defined by low growth, mass unemployment, and a massive debt burden that will slowly crush the country's ability to innovate and compete. This silent, grinding collapse is perhaps more dangerous than a rapid crash. So, let's wrap up this terrifying reality. The official 77% debt figure is a distraction. The truth is that China's real debt burden, including the shadow borrowing by local governments and the liabilities of state-owned enterprises, is closer to 360% of GDP. This hidden $60 trillion problem was the unacknowledged price of their economic miracle. This mountain of debt is now combining with a massive property collapse, crippling deflation, and a fatal demographic shift. The economic engine that drove the entire world for 4 decades is now sputtering. Can China contain it? The Chinese government has enormous control and reserves, and they will fight tooth and nail to prevent a total collapse, mainly because that would directly threaten the party's grip on power. But containment doesn't mean solving the problem. It most likely means managing a long, slow period of painful stagnation, where the promise of a glorious future is replaced by the grim reality of debt servitude. This isn't just China's problem. It's the world's. When an economy this large slows down, demand for everything from German cars to Brazilian iron ore falls. This isn't a crisis coming. It's already here, buried beneath the official statistics. The only question now is how long it takes for the bomb to fully detonate and what the global fallout will look like when it does. If you want to know which global markets will be hit hardest when this debt bomb finally explodes, watch this video next.